Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, Stacy's going to join me and we're going to talk about the problem with people living in their cars. And I'm not calling them a problem. I'm going to call it a problem because of what it's going to do to the economy. This isn't something new. This happened in 1910, 1920, and 1930. They didn't sleep in their cars so much then. They slept in old construction supplies and they made what was called a Hooverville. Now this problem has up 47% in Washington, 45% in San Francisco, and other counties and cities. It's starting to grow. It's like 12, you said it was 12%?
Over the United States.
Over the whole United States
just from last year. And you guys, that's a huge issue. When you're living in your car, that's not something that you want to choose to do. But we want to talk about the pros and the cons and kind of why and maybe some solutions. Or...
Yeah, I've got some solutions. If you're doing that right now, please try to listen. And I can only tell you what I would do. And I've been there, probably not quite there, but I did live with 7 Hindu Indians on a floor one time because I didn't have any money. So just bear with me. But first, it's in, this particular story was Sedona, Arizona. They voted 6-1 to approve a set-aside parking lot exclusively for homeless workers. That's the big takeaway. The city is even installing toilet showers for the new occupants. Now I want to read you a quote from one of these new occupants. I was going to wait, but it seems to fit right here. And this is a quote from the lady that runs the place. If they're homeless for the first time, they're sort of coming to terms with what's happening to their new status. And all they have left is a car. That was from the new nonprofit New Beginnings, Kristen Schwartz. Now, some other things she said was they didn't really want to be beside police stations. And I asked Stacy, I was like, if we lived in a car, we had to, would you want to be next to a police station?
So Chris and I, we had this huge conversation. I wish we'd put it actually on video a few minutes ago.
I told her to, she didn't have her hair done.
I didn't have, well, that looks like heck. I'd been playing in the lake. See my lake behind me? I'd been playing it with the neighbor's dog. So you guys, let's just go down the rabbit hole on this for a little bit. Homelessness. That is a huge issue in our society right now. It has gone up. If you look at all the videos that you see online, TikTok and all that kind of stuff, it has gotten worse and worse. Whether it's drugs, whether it's because inflation, whatever you want to call it. But right now, just last year it was up 12%, based on what I was able to see online, just in the United States. Mm-hmm. In certain areas, it's way worse. If you go into different places, you'll see all these campers sitting there, tents.
Well, in areas like Sedona.
But they're very high cost living.
The average home in the city sells for $930,000. That's the average.
Right. So
this is a very, very expensive area to live.
Yep.
And as I was reading through it, I saw things like they're also building a 30-unit workforce housing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so that's like a man camp? So we're building workforce housing so they can service the city? It's like, is that how it's supposed to be? And I had several thoughts going through me because I'm trying to come up with a fix because
process it.
Yeah, and the mayor seems to be legitimately concerned. She wants to vote on things. You know, that would seem like the right thing to do. But they didn't. They just voted 6-1 to approve a parking lot so you can live there. Put you a toilet in and showers for new occupants.
Well, that seems to be, and I looked it up also. I was doing some research after we started talking about this. In 2024, that is the big issue for a lot of the elections, is the homelessness. What do you do? Why is there homelessness? And we've had it in the past. It has everywhere, but it's really bad now. And I actually personally know people that have lived in their cars and that they have had, that's what they did until they get back on their feet. However, a lot of it has to do with a lot of the drugs that are coming into our country also. You have a lot of illegal immigrants that are coming into our country right now. So it's like a...
I don't want to wad them up though. I don't want to paint everybody with a brush because there is legitimately... I don't know exactly how many senior citizens are
they mentioned them.
Are living in their cars. It said that they were so ashamed they weren't even telling their family. There's people that are going through this that you probably know that you don't even think that would ever be the case, you know? So, and what we can expect is for the situation to get worse. You know,
well, look at this. You got higher cost of living. You got higher prices to rent. I mean, it's impossible right now to find a place to rent. You got inflation. Groceries are higher. Gas is higher. Everything is higher. So when you go to try to find a place to rent, it's almost impossible to find some place. So you have a car, that's what you're going to live in. Here's what you said that was interesting, though, that they didn't want to live next to police stations. If I was going to live in a car, I would like to live in a police station. And I was telling Chris that we were talking about a story that I had in a parking lot one time where someone was trying to get their hand through the door. I would much rather live next to a police station. So yes, that kind of makes me go, hold on.
But, okay, there was one story, and I'm sure there's several stories like this, and there's several stories about people being on drugs and you know, doing all that, because a lot of these big cities have it running rampant because they make the wrong decisions constantly. But one of the stories was about a lady that had, an elderly lady, or man, I don't know if it said the gender, doesn't matter, had lived in this same apartment for 30 years, okay, and got evicted. Supposedly the reason was because whoever bought the apartment complex wanted their grandparents to move in there. But it doesn't matter, it's not yours. You signed a lease, when it's up, they can kick you out. So when that happens, they get sticker shock when they go rental shopping. They can't afford anything, okay? So, you know, there's that. So it's actually happening to a whole group of people, and that group is about to get a lot bigger. Remember in the 1930s, lost their properties because they could not pay their mortgage because they did not have a job. Right now, the people that are here lost their house because their job doesn't pay enough, and maybe they lost their job too, and heaven knows what's going on in a parking lot full of homeless people. You know, there's all kind of snares there that could, you know, mess somebody up, you know, especially when they're dealing with their first time being homeless and their status just got reduced. So, go ahead.
So here's the thing is, I think it's a great concept. I really do. The fact that you will provide a place that someone can go park. However, I think the consequences on the other end, if you don't have someone there with security, you don't have it monitoring, it can turn into a bad place really, really fast. And so I think there's pros and cons, and I see both sides. But if I were someone, I was telling Chris, and I was homeless, and it was that high cost of living there, I'd get in my car and buy a tank of gas, and I'd get the heck out of there, and I'd go somewhere else. I would not stay there. But I guess that's my opinion on that.
Well, here's the takeaway from the video. This isn't new. This is a problem that's been getting worse. It just happened to grow by 47% in this area last year.
Yep.
45 in other areas, and you know, that's the bigger problem areas that happens there first. Okay, that's going to get worse, and especially as people lose their jobs. I just made a video about all the layoffs coming. Now, the other takeaway is, much like America's Great Depression in the 1930s, this marks a serious regression in our standard of living. So we're starting to see the collapse. When you start seeing parking lots that the government is sponsoring for people to be homeless in, because, okay, you're homeless but you got a car, well, that's good enough, you can still work. You know, it just doesn't add up to the American dream. And I went through several things trying to come up with a way to fix it. And one of them was, well, they can do a luxury tax at these high dollar restaurants. But the problem is, the tax would never make it. Yep. It would never make it to the people that needed it.
We had a discussion about that, and I said, that's not going to work.
I was just spitballing, and she's shooting them down fast as you can.
I was like, that's not going to work because they're not going to see the money. I'm like...
That was a good point.
But you have a point.
And the minimum wage isn't... That's a nightmare.
Well, look what they just did in California. They just did $20 minimum wage. That's for the whole entire fast food restaurants. And what did they say? They're going to reduce the hours now, and they're going to raise the burger prices. That's
why I mentioned in this certain area a luxury tax, because
they've mentioned it before.
You got to find a way for people to make money. They can't. Okay, so there's big, huge wealth gaps now, right? huge, monstrous wealth gaps. You got the uber elite and the poor. And there's a few middle class in between, but not like it used to be. Before, the middle class electrician and maybe upper middle class was not too far from doctors and lawyers. And then it started getting way out, and now it's getting way out with tech and all these other things. So we got to find a way to say, okay, this is what the standard of living is this. It was like this in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Let's get as close to that as possible. How do we do it? You know what I'm saying? Or are we just going to have this two-tiered society where the wealthy rule over the poor and they make just enough to scratch by and live in their car?
So we had this discussion. We should have put it on video earlier. So I say that's where it has to correct itself. I don't think that you should go and just tax people that work their butts off. And so, for example,
well, I'm for no taxes, but sales tax is a pretty good way to tax people.
Yeah, but you can't just say, okay, because you make this much money.
No, you're not saying that.
And you
you have enough money to eat a nice meal. You have to pay the server a little bit.
We do that in tips. I disagree with that.
See, tips is a joke too. You're relying on somebody's kindness and generosity to feed your family. That's not. It's just never added up to me.
But I don't agree. I don't agree with that completely, because I sacrificed. I put myself through school. I was down to $70 at one point.
Yeah, and you wouldn't go to this restaurant because it was so expensive, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, well then you don't go. And then the restaurant fails. And then we have a little mini collapse in Sedona, Arizona, and it doesn't affect all of us that are living in the United States with higher inflation, because you know they're going to get bailed out.
And that's what needs to happen. It doesn't need to be that you tax them. You should not be taxing. So
if something like that doesn't happen, the tax is going to fall on all of us through inflation. Inflation's a tax.
Well, inflation's everywhere right now. We're all being faced with that. That's the truth.
I agree. I'm not some kind of socialist that thinks, we need to tax the rich or something like that. I'm just saying there's got to be a way to do this. But
there's not.
To be honest with you, the way might be over, because we should have already had a recession and we should have already had a few corrections, and now they've blown the bubble up so big it probably can't be.
There won't be. As long as the politicians are involved, as long as there are backdoor deals and all this kind of stuff happening, there will never be a way. They will always stimmy it. They will always prop it up. There will never be a correct way. Otherwise, the free market would take care of itself. It would correct itself.
Right.
But it's not that way. So you can't really look at it and go, should we do that? Because that's just what it happens. So should you have a parking lot where homeless people stay?
And I agree with that too.
I don't know. I see the pros. I see the cons. I've known people that lived in their cars, but for the fact
there should not be a parking lot where people stay. That's not it.
But it should be a safe place. If you're homeless, it would be nice to have a safe place. I mean, I get that, but I see so many bad consequences on the other end. So I don't know.
We've just fallen so far. Let us know what you think. There's no good way out. That we're going to have a correction. It looks like it's starting to correct it right now. Guys, I've been doing videos about stocks and warning about the economy. I sat down again today, and stocks are still going down. It looks pretty ugly, really. Is this the beginning? I don't know. Election year, maybe. But I know the wealthy have already sold. Just remember that. Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all those guys sold. I was making videos about it because they sell early. But
it was big enough to where it made the news.
The value investor, who's Warren Buffett's counterpart? Charlie Munger.
Oh, yeah.
He said being a value investor is going to be much harder. There's way less opportunities now. And that's what a lot of people have done through my whole life. The baby boomers were like, well, you just put your money in the stock market and it goes up forever. And that's it. You're retired but wealthy. Well, it might not be that way forever. That's all I'm saying. Well,
this homelessness thing, you guys, just pay attention to this, because I think this is going to become even bigger in 2024. You have all the illegals coming over. So do they take the jobs and then the other people become homeless? Or do the illegals become homeless and we pay for them? There are already camps being set up. You guys have seen videos after videos across the TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Arizona is a huge hot spot right now. California is too. Arizona's big, drugs galore. There are homeless people all over the place right now. This is becoming a really big thing. This is also becoming a big thing when it comes to politics. So the fact that they are creating parking lots, just like they to house people that are in cars, it just shows you that's one more sign that our economy, I think, is in a big thing. I'm not for it.
It's in a big thing. It's in a bad way, and people are just now starting to wake up and sell. You know, I'm seeing staple companies that people would bank on starting to kind of really look toppy and look like they're going to go down, and maybe they're not. Maybe they'll pump it back up somehow and it goes up again, but eventually I don't see a way around it. I think they're going to try to introduce that digital currency.
They already are.
Yeah, in the next 12 to 24 months. But we've been saying that forever, and it's like, it's the nothing burger. The United States is like the only one that hasn't jumped on board because they're the world reserve currency.
They've done it in other countries.
Oh, so. Yeah. I showed the map the other day on my channel of all the different countries and what they were doing and what systems they were running and stuff like that. It's common. But guys, I'm getting a little far off the homeless story, but this is happening in America right now, and it's just something we need to pay attention to, because living in cars is not really the American dream, and I hate it. And it's partly due to drugs and everything else, but
there are some legitimate people, and I've known them. Where they actually, one of my friends of mine, she reached that point where she had a baby, and she was literally changing the diapers, babies in the back seat of the car, and she was living out of the car, and she did for several weeks till she could save enough money to get to a place where she could live. So it legitimately happens to good people. The problem is I think the bad society portion, or you want to say that, the drugs, the alcohol, all the different things that cloud it.
That definitely has a big to do with it.
And it messes up the good people that are really in bad places and need help. And I think that's some of the places that some of these people are, like the elderly and the senior citizens and different things like that. And so what would be some of your solutions?
Well, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, this fentanyl stuff that's being shipped here by China is all part of it too. You remember the WEF little punk, what was his name? Noah Harari, or whatever his name is. Little skinny nerd looking boy. Little pencil neck. Sorry, I shouldn't be talking bad about him, should I? But he said, you know, they're going to have a new God, and it's going to be AI. But the important takeaway from the other part of that video was, the question was, how are we going to deal with all these useless eaters? What are we going to do with them? He said, well, for now, we're just going to give them drugs and video games. Drugs and video games. That was his fix. Is that what's going on?
I don't know. But let's get back to some solutions. So if you were in this kind of...
Don't do drugs and play video games.
So I was telling Chris, I was like, okay, so if I was, because you guys, personally, this is a girl sitting here that does not, I don't have a silver spoon in my mouth. My parents are not rich. I have fought for everything I've got. And there were times I was down to like zero in my checking account. There was one point where I couldn't even pay my car note, and it had to go over to the next, when I finally got paid. They were very kind to me. What do you do at that point? What do you do? And Chris and I were talking about that. If you're living in a car, and I said, if I was living in a high income area, I'd get my car and I'd leave and I'd go find someplace that's lesser.
That's easier said than done.
But you can do it though.
The monster you know is way better than the monster you don't know. And that's what probably a lot of people are struggling with right now. If I was sitting in my car in a parking lot in Sedona, Arizona, I'd probably be putting my hand on the key and being like, okay, this isn't working out. Maybe I can find another job in a different place that has a little better, cost of living, would be a little more hospitable. But just think about opportunities elsewhere. Think about a trade school. You could go get a trade. We need plumbers. We need electricians. We need welders. We need those things. And we're going to continue to need those things. No, jobs won't be at all-time highs, but just that's a way to spend the least amount of time to make the most money. That's why I did it. I wasn't really cut out for college anyway. But it's a hands-on thing that I think a lot of people can do. They just don't know, or maybe they hadn't thought of it, or maybe this video is enough to push somebody over the edge and say, okay, I'm going to drive my car to the trade school. And you might even be able to get a grant or something,
I agree. You cut out for me though.
All right. Guys, have an awesome day. We'll see you in the next one. Later.